My sister, 14-year-old female, and I, 16-year-old female, are not close. She has really bad social skills. She does not have any diagnosis like ADHD or autism, but she has never been good with social stuff. She's very intelligent and is a very good problem solver, and she lacks the understanding that what is easy for her is not easy for everyone. She also lacks the social skills to realize that complaining about other people's interests, their lack of skills, etc., is not how you make friends or get people to like you. This has been an issue with her since we were in elementary school, and maybe even preschool. She'd win at almost every board game and would ask really bluntly why someone was bad, normally me. She'd tell me how easy it was, and I should be winning because I'm older. Our parents always bought board games like that, which suited her way more. I really hated playing against her because her attitude after winning wasn't fun or easy to be around, and she was like that with others too. One time our aunt played with us, and she's a teacher, and my sister basically asked how she could be a teacher when she couldn't win a game against a 6-year-old. I never liked having to spend time with my sister, and I hated playing anything with her even more. She always wanted to spend more time with me, but I avoided that as much as I possibly could. Eventually, she started to sit in on me playing video games, and she would try to backseat game, or would criticize me for taking so long to finish a puzzle, or she would literally take the controller out of my hand and do the puzzle for me. She was like that when I had friends over too. Then she'd get upset when it was clear we didn't want her around. I tried telling her it was rude to insult people or to interrupt others and to help without being asked, and to continue when asked to stop. She would tell me it was boring watching someone struggle and everyone should thank her. There are some things she isn't so good at, and boy, her reactions are strong. Like tantrum strong. Our parents banned charades because my sister could not play that to save her life and would get so mad. She's had friends, but all of them eventually drop her once they grow tired of her complaining about stuff they like. Makeup, music, movies, sports, and indirectly calling them dumb. She's really lonely now because I never hang out with her. She has no friends, and even our cousins don't want to know her. My parents have been on my case about hanging out with my friends and not including my sister, and how I don't ever make time for her anymore. They said I could and should be helping her way more. The other day, I told them it was their job to help her, not mine. They said we're sisters, and yet I act like I don't like her. The truth is, I don't. I don't know if I ever liked her really, but I really don't like her now, and I hate every second I spend with her. I didn't tell my parents this, but saying it was their job to help my sister and not mine really pissed them off. Am I the idiot? Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot. Even if your sister didn't have this horrible attitude all the time, you're not obligated to include her when hanging out with your friends. This is an issue your parents have created by not addressing her rude behavior properly when she was younger. Now she's in her teens. I think it will be really difficult to correct. You mentioned she doesn't have a diagnosis of ADHD or ASD, but not having a diagnosis doesn't mean she couldn't have one of those things, although it wouldn't be an excuse for her behavior, just an explanation. Do you know if your parents ever got her assessed? Especially with young women, they are harder to diagnose and often don't get their diagnosis later in life. Comment 2. She needs therapy. This is classic autistic behavior, and she needs a specialist to help her understand. I could never understand why people did badly in exams as they were easy, until my mom explained not everyone has a photographic memory. I come from a family riddled with neurodivergence, and as a result, we help the children from an early age to understand the limitations of their condition. Your parents are doing her no favors by coddling her. I would let her lose at charades. It's a good way to help her understand how she makes others feel, as she lacks the empathy to understand it intuitively. Trust me, as someone who once was that child, your parents are doing her no favors. Now, for the update. Hey Reddit, it's been a week since I last posted about my sister, and the situation has exploded into a full-blown family drama. Buckle up, because this update is a wild ride. So, after my last post, things got even more intense. My parents sat us down for a family meeting, which was basically them trying to guilt me into spending more time with my sister. They kept saying how families should stick together, and that I should be more understanding. I tried to explain my side, but they weren't having any of it. But here's where the betrayal comes in. My sister, who's always been the innocent one according to my parents, did something that completely shocked us all. Remember how I mentioned she's not good at charades? Well, she's also terrible at keeping secrets. She accidentally let slip that she's been snooping through my room and reading my diary. Yeah, my personal diary, where I vent about everything, including her. Turns out, she's been using the info from my diary to manipulate situations to her advantage. Like, she'd deliberately start playing a video game I wrote about struggling with, just to show me up. Or she'd bring up topics I mentioned to my friends to make herself seem more relatable. It was a calculated move on her part, and it blew my mind. I felt so betrayed, and it was clear that her social skills weren't as bad as we thought. She was just using them in a really twisted way. When I confronted her about it, she tried to play the victim, saying she just wanted to understand me better and be closer to me. But I wasn't buying it. It was a huge violation of my privacy, and it made me trust her even less. The confrontation turned into a massive argument, with my parents trying to mediate. But when they learned about the diary snooping, even they couldn't defend her actions. They were disappointed in her, which is a big deal because they've always been on her side. Now, let's rewind a bit to give you some context about my sister's past behavior. Back when we were younger, she'd always find ways to one-up me, whether it was in school or at home. She'd brag about her grades or how quickly she could solve puzzles. It was like she thrived on being better than me, and it was exhausting. But this diary incident, it was a whole new level of low for her. It wasn't just about being better. It was about undermining me in front of my friends and family. And the worst part? She didn't even seem sorry. She just kept making excuses and trying to justify her actions. After the argument, things at home have been tense, to say the least. My parents have been giving my sister the cold shoulder, which is a first. They've always coddled her, but now they're starting to see the kind of person she's becoming. As for me, I've been keeping my distance. I changed the lock on my door, and I've been spending even more time with my friends. I just can't deal with her right now, especially after such a huge breach of trust. But here's another twist. My sister, in a desperate attempt to win back my parents' favor, tried to throw me under the bus. She told them about a party I went to a few months ago that they didn't know about. It was a low blow, especially since she found out about it through my diary. My parents were upset with me for going to the party and not telling them, but they were even more upset with her for using it against me. It's like she doesn't understand that her actions have consequences, not just for me, but for her too. So now, we're all stuck in this awkward limbo. My parents are disappointed in both of us. My sister is scrambling to fix her image, and I'm just trying to keep my head down until I can move out. Mom neglected me when Sis was preemie and got leukemia, but now she's sick and begs me. I tell her I'll help, but on my terms. When I, 24-year-old female, was 5 years old, my mother had her second child, my sister. We have different fathers, neither of whom were involved in our lives when we were growing up. My sister was born prematurely, which is when my mother went from being my mom to being almost a stranger to me. She spent all her time at the hospital with my sister, and I was shuffled around from friends to family members, and even to strangers who my mother and I didn't know. For example, my aunt would hand me over to someone in her husband's family, or a family friend would pass me on to their friend. My sister was in the hospital for months and had many complications due to being born so early. She was one of the youngest premature babies in the hospital's history. When she started getting strong enough to go home, they found complications with her stomach, which required more time and additional treatments. My mother was in and out of the hospital with her for the next couple of years as they performed surgeries and provided treatments whenever she got sick. During this period, even when my mother was home with my sister, she would usually keep me somewhere else. And when I was at home with her, I was often left alone as her focus was solely on my sister. Then, when my sister was 2 years old, she was diagnosed with leukemia, resulting in more treatments, hospital visits, and very little time spent together as a family. By the time I was 10 years old, my mother was okay leaving me at home while they were at the hospital, so I was often alone. It was around this time that my teachers started suspecting that I might have dyslexia, and they reached out to my mother. However, she was too preoccupied with my sister's health to do anything for me. Nothing changed even after my sister became cancer-free and required less hospital visits. My mother remained completely devoted to her, leaving little to no attention for me. Eventually, as a teenager, I started staying with my girlfriend's family, and my mother didn't seem to care. I would only go back to her house when I needed to retrieve more of my belongings. When I turned 18, I officially moved out and received a diagnosis of dyslexia. Now, several years later, I don't really have much of a relationship with my mother or my sister. I don't blame my sister for any of this. It's just that no bond could form between us when we were younger, and she feels like a stranger to me. Recently, my mother has been experiencing some health problems and has turned to me for help. She has told me that I should be more present and do things to assist her because she's my mom. She has also stated that my sister deserves a relationship with me and accused me of punishing my sister simply for existing. I have told her that this isn't true, but that we are strangers due to her, my mother's, actions. I have also expressed to her that she hasn't been my mom since I was 5 years old, and therefore has no right to ask me to care for her when she hasn't cared for me in almost 20 years. In response, she called me a selfish and spoiled child who never grew up. Am I the jerk? Tia? Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot. It's a sucky situation. Your sister was very sick, but your mother also had a duty to you. She was a mother to 2 children, not just one sick one. But now she's ill. She suddenly remembers she has 2 children? Don't feel guilty for not having a relationship with her. That was her doing, not yours. She was your mother, and it's the responsibility of the mother to care for the child. If she couldn't, why not send you to someone who could care for you, instead of playing pass the parcel with you? I would recommend some therapy, though. This abandonment of you could have repercussions for you down the line. Comment 2. Not the idiot. You had a mother, and then you didn't. While it's not her fault she had to be in the hospital a lot, it is her cross to bear that she didn't include you, let you have a voice, and so on. Your sister is herself a victim here, but that's not the important part. Ask your mother where she was during the days when you were supposed to have her around as a warm and guiding mother. When she inevitably fumbles with finding words, just tell her, "That's what I thought." Now, for the update. Hey Reddit, it's been 3 days since I posted about my family situation, and boy, do I have an update for you. I didn't expect things to escalate the way they did, but here we are. So, after I told my mom off, she went silent for a day, which was weird because she's the type to never let things go. I thought maybe she was reflecting on what I said, but nope. The next day, she showed up at my job. Yes, my job. She made a scene, crying about how I was abandoning her in her time of need. My co-workers were staring, and my boss was not pleased. I was mortified. I took her outside, trying to calm her down, and that's when she dropped a bombshell. She said she was sick, really sick, and that she needed me to move back in to take care of her and my sister. I was stunned. I mean, I knew she had health issues, but she never said it was serious. Now, let's rewind a bit. When I was 12, my mom missed my school play because my sister had a fever. I remember standing on that stage, scanning the crowd for her face, but she wasn't there. That was the first time I truly felt invisible in her eyes. It was a pattern that continued for years. Back to the present, I told her I needed time to think. I went home, and my girlfriend was there, waiting with dinner. She's been my rock through all of this. We've been together since high school, and she's seen firsthand how my mom treated me. She hugged me, and we talked it out. She reminded me that I have my own life now, and I can't just drop everything. The next day, I visited my mom at her house. I hadn't been there in years. It was like stepping into a time capsule, with pictures of my sister everywhere, but none of me. My sister was there too, looking so much like my mom it was uncanny. We sat down, and I listened as my mom explained her diagnosis. It was bad, and she didn't have long. I felt a mix of emotions, sadness, anger, but also a strange sense of duty. I told her I'd help, but on my terms. I said I'd arrange for a nurse and visit, but I wasn't moving back in. My sister, who had been quiet the whole time, finally spoke up. She said she didn't expect anything from me, that she knew our mom had made mistakes. That was the first real conversation we ever had. Things seemed to be settling down until the next day when I got a call from my aunt, the same one who used to pass me around like a hot potato when I was a kid. She said she heard about my mom and wanted to apologize for not being there for me. I was taken aback. I hadn't heard from her in years. She told me stories about my mom that I never knew. Like how after I was born, my mom struggled with being a single parent and how she leaned on my aunt a lot. But when my sister came along, with all her health issues, my mom pushed everyone away, focusing only on her. I started to see a different side of my mom, one that was scared and overwhelmed. It didn't excuse everything, but it made me understand her a bit more. Now, for the subtle justice part. My mom had a small life insurance policy, and she always said it would go to my sister. But when she showed me the papers, my name was on them too. She said it was her way of trying to make things right. I didn't want her money, but it felt like an acknowledgement of her neglect. I decided to use that money for my sister's education. She always wanted to go to college, but thought she couldn't afford it. I told her it was from both of us, a fresh start. I told my husband to find a therapist and take responsibility for his own well-being, but his new therapist assigns me homework. I refuse, but now he says the therapist doesn't like me and I should show more appreciation. I wonder if I made the right decision. Boy, was I wrong. Therapist was manipulating my husband and driving a wedge between us. She was exposed for having an affair with another client, and my husband spiraled into depression. We attend couples therapy and learn about his childhood traumas. We work towards healing and rebuilding trust. Her affair partner reaches out to apologize. My husband and I have been together for over a decade. During this time, he's been in therapy on and off. He had a hard time finding a therapist that was right for him. A few of his therapists early on encouraged him to just medicate, with no regular sessions, and one pushed religion on him. Neither of these worked. What he needed was someone to meet with him semi-regularly, not push their religious beliefs on him, and instead work with him to develop appropriate strategies, talk through issues. Whenever he told me about one of these more questionable strategies, i.e. pushing "just love Jesus," I said I thought that was inappropriate, and he should find a better therapist and go without until then. There have been long stretches where he has gone without therapy because my husband isn't generally good at taking care of himself. That falls on me. I have to remind him to do things to keep him healthy, taken care of. Drink water. Eat more than once a day. There are literally times I've had to tell him he needs to brush his teeth. He also gets anxious making any decisions on his own. I have to help him pick out new clothes. Write emails to work colleagues or groups of friends. He can't make plans for us. I have to make them all, or I should say, I have to help him make the plans so then he can say he made them. He's a good person. He loves me so much, but he is so dependent on me. It is draining. I have to spend at least an hour once a week talking him through whatever crisis he's having. Sometimes this crisis is over what new collectible to buy, a collectible for him that I do not have any interest in. I finally demanded that he look into therapists again. I told him I cannot be his therapist and he cannot depend on me this much. He needs to start taking care of himself and get a therapist that will work with him to develop these skills. And he did, which is great. However, a month into therapy, he said his therapist had homework for me. I was supposed to write out a list of all his great qualities, at least a page or two. Mind you, this is after years of me carrying all his emotional baggage, essentially mothering him, giving him credit for things I did so he could feel better about himself. And one year, I did in fact write out 100 things that I thought were great about him for a gift. I was so frustrated. I said no. I said therapy is his work, not mine, and I've spent too many years of our lives solving things for him. It wasn't fair to ask me to sit down and do this homework when the point of his therapy was for him to build his own skills without depending on me all the time. He was upset, but accepted it and said he understood. Well, just the other day, he told me that his therapist doesn't like me and thinks I should be thanking and showing him appreciation more. I told him I didn't care what his therapist thought. They are his therapist. This does have me thinking though, am I the idiot for not doing the homework his therapist assigned to me? Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. This would make me wonder how your husband phrases his issues and reasons for needing therapy to the therapist. I don't think I'd investigate that personally though, as I agree that it's his therapy and his job to take it seriously enough to not misrepresent how much support you give him. If time proves he doesn't, that's a different issue with bigger decisions to make. NTA for this. Comment 2. Not the idiot. But what exactly is your husband bringing to this marriage? The tone of the post sounds more like you're taking care of an intellectually challenged child. Respectfully, he's a good person. He loves me so much, isn't sufficient for a rewarding and supportive partnership. Now for the update. Hey everyone. A lot has happened since my last post, and I just had to come back to update you all on the chaos that's been unfolding. So, after my husband's therapist gave me that ridiculous homework, things took a turn for the worse. He started seeing this therapist more frequently, and I noticed subtle changes in his behavior. He became more secretive, and our communication started to break down. He'd spend hours locked away in his office, supposedly working on personal growth exercises his therapist had given him. One day, I accidentally stumbled upon an email exchange between him and his therapist. It was shocking, to say the least. The therapist was feeding him lines about how he was the victim in our relationship and how I was the one who needed to change. I couldn't believe it. This therapist, who was supposed to be helping him, was actually driving a wedge between us. I confronted my husband about the emails, and he just broke down. He admitted that he felt empowered by the therapist's words, but also confused because it didn't match up with how he truly felt about our relationship. It was a mess. He promised to stop seeing the therapist and find someone new, but the damage was already done. In the midst of all this, my husband's dependency on me reached new heights. He started having panic attacks at the thought of making the smallest decisions without me. I had to take time off work to be with him constantly, which put a strain on my own career. It was like he was regressing instead of progressing. Then came the bombshell. I found out that the therapist had been having an affair with one of his other clients. It was all over the local news, and the scandal was jaw-dropping. The therapist was discredited, his license revoked, and his practice shut down. But the revelation came too late for us. My husband was devastated. He felt betrayed and lost. He had put so much trust in this person, who turned out to be a fraud. It was a tough pill to swallow, and it took a toll on his mental health. He spiraled into a deep depression, and I was left to pick up the pieces. I tried to be supportive, but I was also angry. Angry at the therapist for manipulating my husband, and angry at my husband for allowing himself to be swayed so easily. Our relationship was hanging by a thread, and I didn't know if we could recover from this. In a desperate attempt to save our marriage, I suggested couples therapy. It was a long shot, but I figured it was worth a try. We found a reputable therapist who specialized in cases like ours, and we started attending sessions together. It was during these sessions that I learned about my husband's childhood traumas. He had never mentioned them before, but they were the root of many of his issues. His fear of abandonment, his need for constant reassurance, it all stemmed from his past. It was a revelation that helped me understand him better, but it also made me realize how much he had been hiding from me. The therapy was helping, but it was a slow and painful process. We had to rebuild our trust from the ground up, and there were days when I wasn't sure if we could make it. But we kept at it, determined to work through our issues. And then, karma stepped in. The therapist's affair partner reached out to me. She was remorseful and wanted to apologize for the role she played in the scandal. She told me that the therapist had manipulated her as well, using the same tactics he had used on my husband. She was another victim of his deceit. Her apology was a small comfort, but it was also a turning point. It helped my husband see that he wasn't alone in being manipulated. It was a step towards healing, and it gave us a sliver of hope that we could move past this. We're still in therapy, and it's still a struggle, but we're making progress, bit by bit. My husband is learning to take care of himself, and I'm learning to let him. It's not easy, but we're trying. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.